Welcome to the Heart of Money podcast, where we discuss the impact that money has on every area of your life and where you can learn to make smarter money decisions. Join our conversation as we discuss our past experiences, talk about how to make better money management choices, and in the end, make a commitment to being weird. Hey folks, welcome back to the Heart of Money, episode 64. I'm your host, Austin Black, joined by my co-host, Bob Wessler, in a few minutes. Thank you so much for tuning into today's show. I want to encourage you to leave a 5-star review for the show that helps us get more exposure, helps us build our audience, and most importantly, helps us learn what you like about the show and how we can make it better for you. Also, be sure you subscribe to the podcast so that you get every single episode on your phone, to your listening device, every single Friday. You don't want to miss an episode. So subscribe and leave a 5-star review, and we look forward to having you tune in every single week to the Heart of Money. This week, we're jumping into part 3 of our Atomic Habits for Finances series as we look at the reactions, the triggers that you need to have in order to make your habits just subconsciously natural. There's a lot of things that we do that we don't even think about, that we don't even understand or realize, but we just react to that feeling, to that trigger. And this week, we're going to learn how you can set those triggers up to where your habits become second nature, become subconscious reactions that you have to everyday life. So let's jump into part 3 of our Atomic Habits for Finances. Hey folks, do you ever feel like you're struggling to gain traction with your money? Maybe you're having a hard time paying down debt, increasing your income, or just managing the money that you have. And maybe you even are having a hard time getting on the same page with your spouse and agreeing with them on how to do something, how to move in the right direction, how to stay on track with where you're wanting to go. If that's the case and you want to seek some outside help, you want to get out of the rut that you're in, and you want to actually start making some progress, changing your pattern and winning in your money and in your marriage, then I invite you to jump on a free 20-minute discovery call with myself and really learn how you can accomplish that. I'll learn about your problems, learn about your struggles, about your desires, about your goals, and I can help walk you through the next steps of how you can win with money and in your marriage. So head on over to freedommoneycoach.com/apply and get that call booked. It's a free 20-minute call where we'll just have an intimate conversation around you, your money, and your goals. That's freedommoneycoach.com/apply. I look forward to visiting with you. Look into some of the trigger philosophy that he has there. I really enjoyed, again, that whole teaching and how it relates to general goal setting, habit development. But that was another one that, even as good as it was, I found it slightly difficult to apply the financial tactics to that. Are there any triggers that you can think of that would be applicable to money management or finances, or just something down that line?
Oh, I think Mr. Bezos had that figured out pretty quick. I'm going to go back to Amazon. The idea that you're going to go and you're going to look on Amazon and you're going to purchase the thing, and when it gets to you, it's not as big of a deal as when you purchased it. eBay, another example of all the hype of winning an item or an auction. The excitement of winning the bid versus taking the thing home with you, whatever it is. I think that was a good example for me, is that I'm making a purchase, and again, in making it invisible, when it's no longer in front of you, where it's no longer a temptation to click on that Amazon button or say, hey, Alexa, I want XYZ. But the whole idea of pressing that button is kind of like a dopamine hit, that I've made a purchase, but then when the thing arrives, it's just another thing. It's just like anything else that we'll ever purchase, there is that momentary fleeting excitement or gotta have it feel to it that passes until you get on to the next thing.
So what are the positive triggers that you think can be implemented? Because, I agree with all of those, but those all sound like defensive habits. What are some of the offensive habits that can be set up for triggered success, you think?
The best offense is a good defense. I don't know what you're trying to say there, but I'll go back to Bobby Bowden. He said, the best team, the team that's going to win is the team with the best pair of defensive tackles. So it's all about defense. but it's a very boring game. And in some cases,
and I guess
finance is boring, until you become the millionaire, and then you're on to your next million.
So I guess that's kind of where I'm coming from. And okay, we talked a few minutes ago about how the best success is achieved when you rediscipline and you retrain and you try to avoid putting yourself in those positions, which obviously if you take away the Amazon app and the eBay app and you don't go to the auction, those I'll call them temptations, those situations that you could spend money on are gone. But I both know that financial success isn't based solely around not spending money. It's also based around being proactive with your management, being proactive with your budgeting, with your allocating, with what you do spend money on to make more money and to increase your wealth building opportunity. So even if we can be defensive in our protection, to me, there's still got to be some of those triggers that encourage us and make it easy for us to stay on a budget, to stay consistent with our investing, to stay consistent with our decisions of making right money choices, not just saying we're not going to spend money in these areas. We're going to, eliminate our, for lack of a better word, excuses here so that we can focus on, let's shift and go, now, what do we do to continue that and to make that a progressive movement forward? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think I might be going out on a limb here, but I'm going to say that a budget is a defensive tool because it guides where you're putting your money. It provides boundaries for where you're not going to spend your money. And it's only as good as your discipline to follow it. So by putting up those blocks, by playing defense in those areas, you are able to use the opportunity cost of, instead of doing the negative, and I'm not going to say positive or negative here, but let's say spending money you don't have that's not in your budget is going to be a negative. But if you're channeling that you have X number of dollars in your budget for whatever purchase, but you also have in your budget that you're going to put X amount away for saving and for investing and other things that are positive, you're playing both offense and defense. So by not spending your money in one place, you're allowing yourself to put that money in places that it will grow for you in the long run. And so I think defense is a very big part of it, unless we're going to talk about wealth creation from a standpoint of either investing, saving, and those I think are more passive than if we get into an entrepreneurial spirit. And I think the entrepreneurial spirit is where you get into the offense or the what your profession is and how you go about your profession and how you make job choices and how long you stay with a job or how often you switch jobs, career challenges, career choices. I think that's the offensive piece, because the money creation comes more from our activities that we do with our time, but because we're trading our time for money. Whereas the money itself, being the product of time that we've given to whatever, we're being more defensive with it so that it doesn't flee or fly away, as we've talked about before, knowing where it goes and making sure that we've got processes in place that keep us from spending money foolishly. So I think
go ahead.
I was going to say, so I think from a budgetary standpoint, how you spend your money is going to be more defensive than how you live your life and the career opportunities you take. And that's where you're creating your wealth, or that's where you're creating you're creating your inflow of money. The wealth is from being able to invest. But unless you put blocks up for where you're not going to spend money, you can't create wealth.
Yeah.
Change my mind.
I think that's a great way of putting it. And I think you're right in that the defense has to come first, because like you said, without the good defense, there is no offense, right? I mean, if you can't protect what you have, then you can't do anything with what there is, right? There's nothing left over if you can't protect it. So I agree that it's a large part, the defensive segment of that. What I'm curious about is, okay, if you look at, let's say, whenever you're creating your budget, do you think a offensive trigger could be when you open your budget, the first set of categories that you apply money to are some of your savings goals? And I'm not saying that I necessarily recommend this, but because of my framework, there's other things that go in front of that. But let's just say, okay, let's say, you take care of your bills, you take care of any debt you have, and then before you go over to your everyday spending categories, you're going to set some money aside for your savings goals to be on the offensive, looking to the future. That kind of pattern can create that trigger to where you've had an offensive decision that then allows you to come back and defend that decision. I think that's probably maybe stretching a little bit and trying to create something there, but I think maybe that same thought process can give us that freedom of offensive behavior, because you're right, the defensive is going to be what defines everything. But I still think we have to have some offensive action and reaction in order to make it where we're not always on the defense, if that makes sense.
Yeah, if you don't set up your defense, you're not going to have offense. If you don't track where your money's going, you're never going to have any left over. You have to make a conscious effort to have that money left over and tell your money where to go, basically. To borrow from The Richest Man in Babylon, and to kind of work into the framework you're talking about, you give 10%, you save 10%, and you live off 80%. So if you know up front that you're going to save 10% and you're going to give 10%, those can be the first 2 boxes on your budget. That doesn't necessarily mean that that's where you started, because that 80% tells you where all your necessities are, and your 80% should not be all necessities, but the idea of the 4 walls, your transportation, your utilities, your clothing, your food, you have to, again, it's a framework. You make 100%. The first things you do are you set aside 10% for yourself for later, and 10% for giving. And that leaves you with the 80%. And then you work within the confines of that 80% to budget what you can afford. So I do think if I'm thinking along the same lines, yes, you're putting that 10% first. One of the first things that we started this conversation with was making it easy. If you are in a position where you have a career that has a 401k, or you can automatically deduct to put in savings accounts, things that pretty much go that 10%, you've set it aside and it's out of your paycheck before you even know it, makes that real easy. That's playing offense with your money, because you've said it once and you don't have to do it again, and it's accumulating over time. But it's the part that you live with on a daily basis that you're saying, what am I doing with this money? What am I able to do? How do I give it? How do I spend it? What do I need to do with it to better myself and my family, and not just spend it?
Right. Absolutely.
So I think
it's a tricky concept because, naturally speaking, like we said, financial management is protecting yourself. But you're not going to win without that offense. I mean, you're going to be in that defensive mode. So I think learning how to merge the two is really the secret sauce for that overall success.
And I'll say that the offense is the fun part once you figured out the defense.
Yes.
You can play trick plays in a football game, oop-de-oop. You can throw an oop-de-oop in the fourth quarter when you're up by 60 points. You can't throw an oop-de-oop when you're down by 21 points. You're not going to have a job as a coach if you're throwing an oop-de-oop on that trick play. It doesn't work. I think you have to have your foundation, again, going back to the beginning of our conversation, of your blocking and tackling. Didn't really mean to get into a sports analogy with all of this, but you've got to have your basics. You got to know where you're going, what your goals are, and how you're going to get there. And you've got to put the roadblocks in place before you can start accumulating money to be able to build wealth. And again, going to the millionaire next door, wealth is what you accumulate by your money working for you, not the work you do with it.
Yes.
So that's the fun part. The more that you can, you start off with 10, 10, 80 and you get to 15, 15, 70 or, whatever it is. And you get to where you don't have to live off the 80%. You can live off 70%. You live off 60%. And the less that you can live off of that greater percentage, the more you can put towards saving and giving that allows you to leave a legacy and create wealth for you and your family.
Right.
So you have to have the basics of the defense before you can go on the offense.
Yep. Totally agree.
Now that we've beat that one to death. I would say the other aspect of that in being defensive, and this was something that I thought was great in the book, was calling it. If you say it out loud, what you're going to do, I'm going to spend this $1 on a donut. Again, sports and donuts, I don't know. It's just what's coming to mind while we're talking about it. But the idea that you're saying it out loud, I am spending this money to do this thing. It makes you cognizant of what you're doing. You're making it obvious, in essence. But then you're also thinking of the trade-off. By saying out loud, is it something you really want to do? And there's a deeper thought process to this, and our listeners, if you've stayed with us this long, this is where you need to go back and read the book to get more out of it than I'm explaining here, because the idea of calling it gives you power. Gives you the power to make the choice and not just breeze through the activity. I'm trying to think of a good example that's not a donut, that you're choosing to spend money in one form or fashion, and maybe we go, just a little bit deeper. The proverbial Starbucks, the proverbial $4, maybe it's $8 now. I don't know. However many bucks it is for that star. That was one of the things he talks about in the book. Coca-Cola gets 70% of their sales from end caps. There's a Starbucks on every corner. It's not that you really want Starbucks, but Starbucks is available. So you get Starbucks. I think from years past, they talk about how much money you could save by skipping that Starbucks. Before you even get in the drive-through to get that $8 Starbucks, how much could you save or get a coffee elsewhere by not spending that $8 or $6, whatever it is? But calling it out loud, I am going to Starbucks. I'm getting my caramel macchiato, fat-free frappuccino, skim milk, whip. And now I'm just throwing things together, and I'm sure somebody's just bludgeoning that order. But you're making the conscious decision to proceed with spending that $6. I think $6 is probably reasonable for what those things cost now. Versus saying, you know what, I'm going to keep that $6 in my pocket, and I'm going to get black coffee and add my own sugar and creamer to it. And then I'll save that money for a Starbucks on another day. I really don't need Starbucks today. But calling it out loud, the opportunity cost of those $6 and what you could do with it otherwise if you didn't make a habit of daily going to Starbucks.
So for some reason, I'm not recalling a lot of that concept. So I'm trying to absorb the examples that you gave there and really remember what you talked about. So if I'm understanding right, you're basically saying if you want to implement a new habit, you basically say that you're going to do that new habit. So if you're going to make a habit of playing the guitar every day, before you start, you would say, I'm going to play the guitar today. And you would pick up and play. And that would kind of become your verbal acknowledgement of what you're going to be doing. Is that correct?
That was one side of it. The part that I'm pulling out is very much the opportunity cost. But by me choosing to do this, the downside or the opposite effect that is going to take place because of the action I'm taking. So if in your example of playing the guitar, I'm a guitar player. That's the first thing. It's not I'm learning the guitar. It is I'm a guitar player. You are becoming a guitar player by learning to play the guitar, like your drummer example. But if you get to 11 o'clock at night and you haven't played the guitar, let's go back to the previous conversation we had that said, you know what, you skip one day, it happens. You're probably not going to play your best guitar at 11 o'clock at night, but you still have the choice to strum a few strings or skip, but don't make it 2 days in a row. What you're making that conscious decision at 11 o'clock at night of, I'm a guitar player. If I am a guitar player, I need to play the guitar. I can choose not to play the guitar. If I choose not to play the guitar, I'm not going to be a very good guitar player tomorrow. And I don't want to go as far to say that I'm not a guitar player, but I'm not a guitar player today. And there's more likelihood that I'm not going to be a guitar player tomorrow if I don't play the guitar today. And one of the things that he points out is doing 2 minutes of something is better than doing nothing at all. It's back to that whole 1% better every day. Beginning is half finished.
Could you apply it to maybe this concept to come from that money side? Then, if you're deciding, to go through the drive-through or not, or what you're going to do there, would it be saying, okay, I am not going to go through Taco Bell today because instead we're going to go home and make tacos tonight? Would that be an equivalent of kind of making that choice and that decision?
In the case of Taco Bell, you're saying I have $7 to eat at Taco Bell, and I can choose to spend the $7 at Taco Bell, or I can choose to spend that $7. I can put that $7 in my savings account. I can put that $7 towards a real Mexican meal, or I can spend $3 and get all the ingredients I need at the grocery store and have 2 meals of tacos. But those are all opportunity costs. By calling out, I have my $7. I'm going to Taco Bell because it's fast and easy and cheap, but I can't come back tomorrow because then it's $14. But the idea is that you're choosing right then and there what to do with your money. And you're calling it out loud what the alternative is and what you're giving up by spending that money in that way.
Gotcha. So it's basically the essence of me talking to myself, except now I actually have a decent conversation we're sharing.
I don't know. I don't know how many voices you keep in your head and how loud you get and who wins. But yes, it's the whole idea of you're not just going through the drive-thru at Taco Bell because you saw the Taco Bell sign and you heard the ding in your head, or make a run for the border or whatever it was. You're not going for your 4th meal, 5th meal, 6th meal, whatever meal it is. But you're saying, oh, I'm hungry. I want a taco. There's Taco Bell. It's going to cost me $7. am I going to choose to spend my $7 at Taco Bell, or what will I lose out on by using that $7 at Taco Bell?
Yeah. So let me ask you this thing. For some reason, this whole concept I'm not remembering much of. I know a lot of times I will have that conversation in my head, and it doesn't get spoken out loud, but I have that thought process that I walk through. Is that the same thing, or is it something that really you need to say out loud?
That depends. And I think one of the things I took away from this book was a reflection on another book that I was reading called Turn the Ship Around. I mean, our listeners are going to have a whole library if they keep listening today of all the books we're referencing. Turn the Ship Around is about a group of submariners on their submarine in the Pacific Ocean, and they are the worst submarine in the fleet. And they instilled these different practices in their day-to-day activities, and it turned them around from being worst in the fleet to best in the fleet for years. One of those processes was think out loud. And in a submarine, when you say, I'm going to do X, and you say it out loud, and you've got 3 other guys in the room, they can all hear you, and they can clarify, they can correct, or they can agree. So I think on one hand, if you're in a team setting and you verbalize something, you're getting feedback from others. If it's only you, having that conversation in your head is one thing, but I think verbalizing it gives a different sound to it. And I think it makes it more concrete without you actually doing it. My wife can attest to the number of times that I have the conversations in my head and she's not privy to it. And then I think I've had the conversation. But right. I think there's still an aspect to it that it is probably better to say it out loud than it is to have the conversation in your head with all 3 of you. That's who it is with me, myself, and I, not Irene. But
who wins the conversation?
Yeah, who wins? Which shoulder? By verbalizing it out loud, you're hearing what you're saying, and in some cases, you'd be like, "Wow, that sounded really dumb." Maybe. I don't know. I think it's probably a trial and error type thing. Maybe you just need to talk to yourself more when you out loud when you go to Taco Bell and realize that you're passing up real Mexican by going to Taco Bell. Especially having tacos later at night.
In Butler, Missouri, you get what you get. So,
yeah, it's not on the border, and no. That's not Mexican either. That's Tex-Mex, but that's my favorite. So.